You think modern clickbait is wild? Try 18th century England, where a village midwife once claimed a young woman was giving birth not to babies, but to rabbits. Yes, actual rabbits. If this sounds like a rejected Monty Python sketch, remember that the story fooled surgeons, physicians, and even members of the royal court. For months, newspapers breathlessly reported on a miracle of nature, and London society argued about whether England was about to become a nation of part human bunnies. Our unlikely heroine was Mary Toft, a 24-year-old housewife from the small market town of Godalming, Surrey. In September 1726, she began experiencing severe labour pains. The local midwife, Alice Mew, arrived expecting a normal delivery, and instead claimed she witnessed something straight out of folklore. Mary expelling. Brace yourself. A creature's parts. At first it was animal matter, then entire pieces that looked unmistakably like rabbit flesh. Alice sent word to London. Because apparently, when you see a woman give birth to a bunny, you immediately think someone in the capital needs to know about this, enter John Howard, a well-regarded surgeon from nearby Guildford. Howard inspected the evidence and was convinced something extraordinary was happening. He recorded that Mary had delivered several rabbit parts in succession, and he dutifully preserved each specimen in jars of alcohol like a proud collector. Before long, he claimed she had produced not just fragments, but whole baby rabbits. Howard began sending letters to prominent physicians, describing the most miraculous conception, and the story spread faster than a hare across a meadow. By November, London's medical elite were hooked. King George I's own surgeon, Nathaniel St, travelled to Surrey to witness the marvel firsthand. André wasn't some gullible back-alley barber. He was a respected court physician. Yet he returned to London, declaring the case genuine, carrying with him several bottled specimens and a sworn testimony that Mary Toft was indeed the mother of a litter of rabbits. Imagine the 18th century tabloids. Woman delivers 12th bunny, royal surgeon confirms. The public went mad for it. Coffeehouses buzzed with debate. Pamphlets flew off printing presses. Wagers were placed on how many more rabbits Mary might deliver. Satirical prints depicted half-human, half-rabbit offspring hopping through Parliament. It was, in short, the 1720s version of going viral. But not everyone was convinced. Some skeptical doctors pointed out the obvious. Biology simply doesn't work that way. A few suggested that the supposed rabbits might have entered the womb after death, a theory as unsettling as it is implausible. Others whispered about trickery, but no one could explain how a poor country woman could fool so many learned men for so long. Mary herself played the part of bewildered victim, claiming she felt strange movements inside her and had dreams filled with rabbits after a run-in with a mysterious hare months earlier. Folk belief at the time included the idea of maternal impression, that a pregnant woman's experiences could physically mark her unborn child. So her explanation didn't sound completely absurd to a public steeped in superstition. Still, the sheer weirdness kept everyone talking. By late November, the spectacle had escalated to near royal attention. King George ordered his top physician, Sir Richard Manningham, to investigate personally. Manningham was more cautious than St André, and began daily examinations, noting inconsistencies in Mary's symptoms. Meanwhile, rumors swirled. Was this a miracle of nature? A divine warning, or an elaborate hoax? London's newspapers milked every possibility. One satirist joked that Parliament should breed rabbit children for the army, since they would multiply with patriotic speed. Even in the 1720s, people couldn't resist a good pun. And so the stage was set. A small-town housewife, a handful of ambitious doctors, a credulous public, and a story too outrageous to ignore. But as with every great sensation, the higher it hopped, the harder it was about to fall. Sir Richard Manningham arrived in December 1726 with a sharper eye and far less patience for miracles. Where others saw wonder, he smelled a setup. He kept Mary under close watch at the Bath Inn in London, posted attendants in her room, and insisted that nothing, absolutely nothing, enter or leave without inspection. Days passed, no rabbits appeared. Mary complained of pains, but Manningham noted that the supposed labour came only when she was unwatched. Meanwhile, the specimens already collected were showing suspicious signs of ordinary wildlife. Some were clearly adult rabbits, complete with grass and corn in their stomachs. foods that do not grow inside a human uterus, Manningham began asking awkward questions that Mary and her handlers could not quite answer. The pressure mounted. Crowds still gathered outside the inn, hoping for another delivery. But physicians started to whisper that they had been duped. St. André, the king's surgeon who had first championed Mary's case, grew defensive and irritable. Newspapers that had once hailed the miracle now printed biting cartoons of gullible doctors being chased by rabbits. Coffeehouse patrons who had bet on the next litter quietly folded their wagers. Finally, a local porter confessed that he had been supplying Mary's family with small rabbits. Under questioning, Mary herself broke down. She admitted that, desperate for attention and money, she had inserted parts of dead animals into her body and pretended to give birth to them. The scheme had begun after she miscarried months earlier and feared her husband would leave her. The rabbit idea came from a chance sighting of a hare in a field, a fleeting image that became the seed of one of the strangest hoaxes in medical history. The revelation was explosive. Londoners who had flocked to marvel now laughed at the Rabbit Woman, turning her into a living punchline. Pamphleteers released broadsides with titles like The Anatomical Rabbit and The Wonderful Deliveries of Mary Toft, mocking everyone from rural midwives to royal physicians. Satirical plays filled the theaters. One popular ditty ended with the line, "A woman once with rabbits bred," and put the court in fear and dread, which is catchier than most 18th century pop songs. The doctors who had vouched for Mary suffered real damage. St. André became the butt of relentless ridicule, his professional reputation permanently scarred. Manningham, who had exposed the fraud, emerged with his credibility intact and even enjoyed a boost in standing. The episode became a textbook warning for the growing field of obstetrics. Never let sensational claims override careful observation. As for Mary, she faced a brief but intense public humiliation. Authorities debated charging her with fraud, but settled on a few weeks in Bridewell prison for being an imposter and a cheat. She was eventually released, returned to Godalming, and lived quietly for many years. Remarkably, she had more children, actual human ones, without incident, and died in 1763 at the age of 60. Local parish records note her burial without a single mention of rabbits. Yet the story refused to fade. The Rabbit Woman became a symbol in debates about science and credulity. Enlightenment writers pointed to the fiasco as evidence of how superstition and ambition can fool even the educated. Cartoonists kept resurrecting her tale whenever they needed a jab at quack doctors or gullible elites. Even today, medical historians use Mary Toft as an early case study in the power of confirmation bias and the danger of chasing headlines. Looking back, it is easy to laugh, and plenty of 18th century Londoners did. But the saga reveals a deeper truth about human nature. People wanted to believe. For physicians, the chance to witness a biological marvel was irresistible. For the public, the idea of a common woman outdoing the natural order was thrilling. And for Mary, caught between poverty and obscurity, the hoax offered a brief, bizarre escape. So picture the final scene. The Bath Inn is quiet. The crowds have gone home. Mary sits alone. No rabbits, no miracles, just a young woman who turned a desperate plan into one of history's strangest medical scandals. 3 centuries later, her name still pops up whenever anyone mentions unbelievable births or the hazards of uncritical science. It turns out the most astonishing part of the story is not that a woman gave birth to rabbits. It is that so many smart people wanted it to be true. And that perhaps is the real moral of the bizarre case of Mary Toft. When a tale is strange enough, we will hop right along with it.